To close out our discussion of idealism as a philosophy, I want to make three direct connections to educational implications that have held true for most idealist systems throughout the course of the history of education. There are lots and lots of details to work out, and many variations are possible there, but there are three themes that one can look for and see instantiated in idealistic systems of education that almost always are big tip-offs that one is dealing with someone in an idealistic tradition or an institution, so forth. We know that idealism metaphysically emphasizes the higher world over the lower physical world and sees the lower world as of less intrinsic interest or perhaps of no interest at all. It's much more interested in the abstract, it's more interested in the eternal, and so forth. Now, the way this turns out educationally and becomes institutionalized is, as I've got it here in point one, is that idealistic education is very much theory heavy and practice light. Right? It emphasizes theoretical education and is not very much interested in practical education. In many cases, it is the idealist tradition that is primarily responsible for the notion of ivory tower approach to education. The idea then is that the educated person goes up into the ivory tower, or the professor, and basically stays in the ivory tower, and the ivory tower is a bunch of abstracted theoretical speculation, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with real life, right, or the practical concerns of the world. And there could be a number of components here, an emphasis on the abstract over the experiential. So one pedagogical issue that becomes important is how we deliver things to students. Do we have the professor stand and deliver an abstract lecture to students, or is it the case that we're going to emphasize the experiential, where students are doing hands-on sorts of things? You'll find very little experiential education in idealism. Instead, you will have a very intellectually oriented, abstract set of deliveries. And that is reiterated in this point here. We're interested in the intellectual side of life. We're not interested in the applied side of life. And a formulation you might have heard is the idea of knowledge for its own sake. That is to say, the realm of knowledge, the realm of the intellectual, dealing as it is with higher order abstractions, that exists for its own sake. It has no intrinsic necessary or value connection to anything outside of it, much less the lower applied physical world and so forth. We see, for example, in some schools of mathematics, there is often a distinction between pure mathematicians and applied mathematicians. And the mark of an idealist culture in that mathematics department is if there's tension between those two sides of the mathematics department, and particularly if the pure mathematicians in some sense see them as better, as more significant, as higher up the totem pole, so to speak, because they're dealing with mathematics purely and they're not getting their hands dirty as those applied mathematicians who are practically on the way to being engineers, way down the order of being, right, so to speak. I've got a couple of quotations here that are representative of this idealistic way of thinking philosophically as it applies to educational matters here. One ancient, one modern, to get a sense of the continuity of this position over great stretches of time. The first I have is a quotation about Archimedes, taken from Plutarch's Lives. It's actually from the essay that Plutarch wrote on Marcellus. But in the course of that, he has an extended discussion here of Archimedes, Archimedes being one of the great mathematicians of the ancient world. So I'll read this to you now. Quote, "Yet Archimedes possessed so high a spirit, so profound a soul, and such treasures of scientific knowledge, that these inventions had now obtained him the renown of more than human sagacity, he yet would not deign to leave behind him any commentary or writing on such subjects, but repudiating as sordid and ignoble the whole trade of engineering, and every sort of art that lends itself to mere use and profit. He placed his whole affection and ambition in those purer speculations where there can be no reference to the vulgar needs of life. studies the superiority of which to all others is unquestioned, and in which the only doubt can be whether the beauty and grandeur of the subjects examined or the precision and cogency of the methods and means of proof most deserve our admiration. All right, fairly clear example of idealism in practice. We're only interested in the higher, purer abstraction, and we dismiss with a sneer anything that has to do with practical life, right, so to speak. All right, that has big implications for education in practice. My more recent example is from another mathematician, G.H. Hardy, Englishman, brilliant mind. His dates are 1877 to 1947, so he straddled the late 19th century and early 20th century world. Quote, this is from his memoirs, and he's speaking proudly of his achievements here. He says, quote, "I have never done anything, quote, useful. No discovery of mine has made or is likely to make, directly or indirectly, for good or ill, the least difference to the amenity of the world," unquote. All right, and he holds that to be one of his great accomplishments and something that he is especially proud of. Yeah, the point being that he spent his life mathematically in the world of theory, and the world of theory has absolutely nothing to do with the world of practice, so there's never going to be any connection between his theoretical work and his practical world, and that is the best kind of life and the best kind of career for him as a mathematician.